I didn't have the money for all the toys and such that police officers normally did. I had to really watch my dimes and nickels and invest them early and as much as I could to get the most out of that compound interest. Because what I realized at age 24 was I had the most valuable asset, even more important than money at that point, which was time. So I could endure what would become the bad times of 2008 and et cetera. I could take those dips because I had enough time to come back and do even better when things would be bad.
Welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, a show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 369.
This is the podcast where everyday millionaires spill the beans on their stacks of green. We are your hosts, Jason and Stacy, ready to bring you the unscripted tales of wealth, warts and all, because who needs a script when you're rolling in dough? Join us as we dive into the net worths and asset allocations of regular folks turned financial titans. It's like Cribs, but with a little bit more practical advice. We promise the only rare edits are to be kid-friendly, so you won't hear any naughty language, just lots of cha-ching and a sprinkle of do-re-mi. So buckle up, tighten those purse strings, and get ready to laugh and learn with Millionaires Unveiled.
Awesome, man. I cannot wait for today's episode. And as always, we're always looking for new great guests. If you're a millionaire or soon-to-be millionaire or multi-millionaire, we'd love to have you on the show. I'm still looking for some various professions. I know we had journalism out there as one recently that we haven't had a lot of guests on or any. And a professional athlete came up again. And we had an inquiry about some engineers. We used to have quite a few, I feel like, engineers that came on. But it's been a while. We haven't actually had a lot of some of those traditional careers, professional careers, engineers, accountants, doctors, lawyers. I haven't had one of those on in quite a while. So at any rate, if you haven't heard your story also, we'd love to have you on the show as well. Today, we have James. He's retired now, but used to work in law enforcement. He was not a police officer, but worked kind of in administration of law enforcement. He gets into that and tells all the details about that. And he's got a net worth of $2.8 million. That includes his pension, which he is drawing from right now. And yeah, this is a really unique episode in a lot of ways. He retired early, so to speak, hit his number, and had some options to be able to buy down and buy into his pension a little bit early, and did so. Did so to spend some time and take care of his some of his family that needed some care. So going to be a great episode. I think you're going to love it with James. Very unique, and he's also in that category of retired and retired early. So I know several people have reached out on that over the last several months. So without any further delay, let's get right into it with James.
James, do you want to just give us your background and what you're up to now?
Sure. I'm a retired law enforcement employee who right now I retired to become a full-time caregiver for my father. I was what's called a civilian non-sworn employee, which means I wasn't a police officer. I was one of the civilians behind the scenes who kind of kept the lights on and all the processes rolling back at the police department while the cops were out hooking and booking people and catching bad guys. I was a program officer, and my duties were I was the police record supervisor, the evidence vault supervisor, the district attorney liaison, quartermaster for the department, as well as a side hustle I created called the intake technician for special events. And I retired in 2020, about 7 months into COVID. And I recently experienced my first uh, raise as a retired person this past October. So I did 30 years. Well, I did 5 years part time, then 25 years full time, and then was able to buy 5 years with the money that the investment money that had compounded over all that time to retire 5 years early at 49 after I hit my magic number at 48.
Wow, and I can't wait to get into all these details. It's pretty cool. Somebody who, worked and appreciates you and your service, but worked in a, I don't know if I'd call it a non-traditional, but just something we haven't had on the show before, and retiring before you hit 50. I mean, that seems like a pipe dream for a lot of people, but you executed a strategy, and you've shared some things before we got rolling that we'll get into. But before we do, what's your net worth today?
My net worth with my retirement funds is approximately 1.4 million. The pension, which I get at 75% of what was my base salary when I retired, I don't normally count that, but I probably should. And that would mean that number would probably double. So probably somewhere around 2.83 million, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and I think I more and often lately I've kind of been putting those pensions into the net worth because in a lot of cases people are close to vesting or they already have vested. In your case, you've already vested and you're actually already collecting on it. So and it's a little easier to value at that point too because you kind of know what your payouts look like, you know what your annual increases are likely to look like with inflation, and it's kind of a math equation that an actuary, somebody who's way smarter than me, probably puts together, but I can work a calculator pretty quick. And I think your numbers are pretty accurate that based on your average life expectancy, your pension's probably worth 1.3 to 1.4 million at this stage. So congrats to you. I want to ask, and I don't ask this on every episode, but I'm curious what your range of household income was, through that whole journey of becoming a millionaire.
So I'm 52 years old. So when I started, when I was hired full time with the department in 1995, my salary was $17,993.13. So a little bit low compared to salaries today. When I retired, my base salary was approximately 65,000. So when you talk about a police officer, you're talking about someone that when they end their employment here in the Las Vegas Valley, you're talking about someone who's probably ending their career to at least 100,000. But I was a civilian, so I made significantly less money. So I had to, I didn't have the money for all the toys and such that police officers normally did. I had to really watch my dimes and nickels and invest them early and as much as I could to get the most out of that compound interest. Because what I realized at age 24 was I had the most valuable asset, even more important than money at that point, which was time. So I could endure what would become, the bad times of 2008 and et cetera. I could take those dips because I had enough time to come back and do even better. When things would be bad, my continued uninterrupted investments would buy things when they were low, and then when things would come back, what was low, what was cheap, now was more expensive. And because I had that time to recover, that made the most sense for investing as absolutely as much as I could out of my paycheck. Every time I got a raise of some time, whether it's a COLA raise or I got reclassed to a somewhat higher position, I would take that extra money that I was getting, throw it right into the what I call the engine of the Roth IRA that I started when they were created in 1998. I actually started before Roths were created. I had a 457 deferred comp. I had a 403b. So those were the engines. But what the engines needed was they needed fuel, and the fuel was my income. So I would throw as much fuel at those engines as I could, and they produced for me very well, but it took a long time because starting at 18,000 a year, compound interest, it's not going to happen for a long time for you. So you got to be able to look at those statements and realize, yeah, I'm going to have to ride with this for a long time before I start seeing really big numbers.
Is it surprising to you that you were able to become a millionaire when you started at 18,000?
That's a great question. It wasn't surprising to me because when I started, when I was first interested in personal finance back in 1986, I was listening to a fellow by the name of Bob Brinker, a show called Bob Brinker Money Talks. You could find the past episodes on YouTube. I would listen to him every weekend and learn about personal finance there. Also, I had a short stint with Primerica, or I trained in one of their places, and I learned about personal finance there, the rule of 72 and the rule of 4%, and I realized between those two things, between Bob Brinker and between Primerica, that okay, what what personal finance was just math. And if I had the dedication and I had a plan together and I stuck to the plan, because it's just math, it's not magic, it's not anything particularly special, the numbers would work out eventually. And I had my eye on a million because way back then, hitting a million was kind of the dream for many, 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 many people. Over the 300 plus shows of Millionaires Unveiled to this point, you guys have interviewed many people who are multimillionaires. But for me, going way back then, the idea was always hit that million, find some way to hit that million. So between the education I got back in 86, 87, and then actually having a chance to put that knowledge into practice in 95 in a full-time job, I knew it would take a long time, but I should be able to hit it. And eventually, I really saw those big returns, that compound interest started to work. And I knew that I would make it. I would probably make it before 30 years, and maybe I would have the opportunity to retire before 30 years if I wanted to. So I had confidence that it would work.
When did you start seeing kind of that compounded interest effect take effect for you? I mean, did it take a decade? Was it 15 years? 20?
Funny you asked that. I was thinking about that the other night because, again, preparing for this, I've been going all the way back to 86, trying to remember the milestones and what it felt like and all that. And it seems to me it was around the 7 to 10 year time period. And when I really saw that happening on my check, and the statements that would come in, I was also hearing at work, I was hearing some of the cops that I helped, well, most of the cops that I helped, complain about how they couldn't afford what they wanted to do. And the reason they couldn't afford it was they had so much money going out the door for, like I said, the toys, sometimes the alimony for a divorce or multiple divorces, kids, everything that money tends to fly out the door for when you're not necessarily paying super close attention. And I realized it was somewhere between that 7 to 10 year period when I look at my statements, I had more money in those retirement accounts than they had cash on hand, even though they're making a lot more money than I was. And that's also when I learned, when I realized, wow, I really am on the right path here. Because if I had these guys' income, holy moly, I would be a lot farther ahead than I am now. But even with my reduced income compared to theirs, I'm doing a lot better financially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's
Did
7 to
you
10 year time period.
did you change your strategy at all or investment funds at all during the last 20, 25, 30 years?
My one regret is that I didn't employ the use of an active financial planner / retirement guru advisor much earlier. I started so early that my strategy was somewhat scattershot. Uh, yeah, I the only choices that we had with the university, because it was a university police department that I worked for, was a 403B and a 457 back in '95. So what little I could invest, I started there. Then in '98, the Roth IRAs came into being, but the state of Nevada wasn't quite ready for them yet. So I turned back to Primerica, started a Roth there. As time passed, I was able to work to convert the 403B over to Roth. What also tends to happen in these situations with employers is some companies will fall out of favor and they'll choose not to carry their products and then pick up those products from different companies. So I had to stop contributing to some funds that were part of those retirement vehicles and start up the same type of retirement vehicles with new companies. So I ended up with, between non-qualified and, retirement tax deferred vehicles, oh gosh, 5 to 10 different accounts. And so, yeah, that got kind of messy. So when I got to about 7 to 10 years before retirement, I knuckled down with a wonderful financial advisor who I met and started working with probably about 5 years before that. So I met him about 15 years before what my target date was going to be for retirement. And he took a look at my portfolio and said, we got to do something here because you're all over the place. You're doing great overall, but when you get to retirement, what you want to do is you want to simplify this stuff so that it's easy to track it. You don't have 29,000 here, 13,000 there, when you can just combine that into, say 3 accounts, and it'll be much easier to track that, and much easier for the compound interest to accrue if that's together. So that was the change in strategy. It didn't change from, starting out with a 403B and a 457 and then a Roth and then a couple very low non-qualified accounts. That kind of stayed all the way through towards the end. But how that was managed, if it were managed professionally, I probably would have done a little bit better. Who knows? But that would be the one change I would have made.
So today, in terms of allocation, is essentially everything invested in the market, no real estate holdings, etc.
No real estate. I love the episodes, and shout out to those folks who kill it with real estate. What sticks in my mind is episode you guys did with someone who they hit their first million after like 4 or 5 years of real estate. I mean, that's amazing to me. Now, I understand that would take like 100% of their time, 24 hours a day, to hit something like that. But you would really have to love it, I think, to do it. And real estate was, I hate the idea of it. I really, my thing was helping people in that law enforcement space, whether it be police officers who needed something done so they could do their job, or victims of crime who came in and they needed help with, the worst day in their lives that they were dealing with. That was my jam. That's what made me want to get up in the morning and go to work. Even if it were just for 4 or 5 years, if I tried real estate, Jace, I would find some way to sell. I'm serious. I wouldn't make it, brother. So all you guys out there who are hitting it real estate wise, bless your hearts, but I just couldn't do it. So I stuck with these retirement vehicles, and eventually what we did was we broke it up into thirds. So 33% with what eventually became a Roth IRA group of the 403Bs that were Roth, and the other Roth account that I started in Primerica decades before. All that merged together. 457 was another 33%. And then we created a regular IRA for the final third. So that with the different withdrawal rules and penalties or lack thereof, I could, if I wanted to, I could pull out money immediately after retirement through the 457 and not have a penalty. But then if I waited until 59 and a half, I could pull out money from the Roth or the regular IRA without a penalty and just have to pay taxes on, the regular IRA. And the breakdown on that, when this first started with the university, these plans were offered in 95. The choices you had to invest in were mostly mutual funds. Wasn't a lot of variety. But over time, working with my financial advisor, what we've done is we've broken that up so that now, or rather shortly before I retired, instead of being mostly mutual funds, those three retirement vehicles together are made up of 70% of index funds, 15% stocks, 10% ETFs, and only 5% mutual funds. So I went from extremely aggressive at 24 with mostly mutual funds to now a third of it's conservative, another third of it is moderately aggressive, and then the last third is, I would say, aggressive. So I pulled back on my risk, but I broadened, almost done a 180 on the types of material that I have invested in, because now I'm in, I don't want to say the end game because it makes it sound like I'm about ready to die, but I'm at the other side where it makes more sense to be invested in stuff that's not going to have wild swings. So that's how that changed over time, over these, since 95. So almost 30 years.
Stace, name some business partners that have really got it done.
Procter & Gamble.
Ben & Jerry?
Supply and demand.
Salt and Pepper?
Peanut butter and jelly.
What about the perfect partners when it comes to growing your business?
That's Shopify.
That's right. That's you and Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling shipping supplies or promoting productivity programs, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to the leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less, thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. What I love about Shopify is no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the United States, and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/unveiled, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/unveiled now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. That's shopify.com/unveiled. And thanks again to Shopify for supporting today's episode.
So at this point, I mean, have you been able to make the switch on spending down some of that? Or is it, hey, I'm just going to continue to live off this pension basically and let this grow?
That's a question you ask a lot, and I really like that question. A little bit, yes. But, being a caregiver for a family member is a 24-hour job. But my dad is he's 87 years old. He's the best guy I've ever met. And there's a restriction that comes with having to spend, 24 hours caring for someone you love. Haven't been able to, go out and enjoy the wildlife. Doesn't mean I haven't started to dip my toe in it. Purchase I made last year that I'm very happy with. And I think if I recall, I think you're a little bit of a car guy, so you might appreciate this.
I do like cars.
I bought a 2023 Hydro Blue Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 392.
Okay, so you got yourself a toy.
Oh,
finally.
Yeah.
And you're in a good part of the country to go use that.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, as long as you don't get caught by the cops, right?
Hey, I think you know a guy though, don't you?
Yeah. I know a couple. I know a couple. Before this, I always paid cash for cars, and obviously, things that were quite a bit cheaper than this vehicle. But this was the first vehicle that I bought where I financed it. Why did I finance it and not buy it outright? Because it didn't make sense to me to part with that much money in one chunk when my investments are doing so well. They're doing better than the payments that I would be making, even with the insane interest rate that I had to settle for with the car loan. And by the way, that's another thing I learned. I had never gotten a car loan. I had never put money down on a house, nothing like that. When I tried to buy this car, even with all the assets I had as retired and successful, I was denied 30 straight times. They wouldn't touch me. I came in with statements, proof, all of that, Jace, opened up the whole thing to them. And they looked at him, they said, "We see that, we understand it. We know, we think you're being honest, but we're still going to deny you because it's not our practice to grant a loan of this size to someone who's making as little money as you are monthly or annually," because then I was now on pension. And according to what we normally do, even though you've got the money, we see you can afford it. No, the numbers don't work for us. So
wow.
After 30 attempts, I finally found a bank that would work with me. So I got my first car loan at the age of 51.
And was that just due to where your credit was, or was it an income thing?
No, it was no. My credit was fantastic. My score was out of sight. It was the income. It was, I wasn't bringing in active money, and I would say to them, "Well, wait a minute, I did everything right." So everybody's saying when I was growing up, I did everything right. I paid off my credit card every month. I saved. I invested. And you're telling me that because I don't have a history of credit card debt having been paid off over more than a month, right? Mm-hmm. What they call a credit history, but it's actually a debt history. I don't have that, and I don't have the monthly income that I had before. You're going to deny me the car loan because even though I have the assets, I just don't meet your normal paradigm. And they said, yeah.
Wow.
But finally, I found a bank that would work with me, and it's working out fine. So yeah, I'm learning how to spend. I can now buy things that when I see it, I like it, I can buy it. I don't have to have those second or third thoughts. But yeah, it's a real challenge. I remember listening to you ask that question to people, and I would think, how hard would that be? Yeah, okay, you got to spend money. But it's actually a real thing. When you have a practiced human behavior that you've been
Yep.
doing for decades, it's difficult to change it.
Yep. And that's exactly why I ask it. So I want to hit on something that we discussed a little bit before we started the recording, and you brought it up a little bit with this car situation, but rewind a little bit. I want to talk about choices and kind of that moment that you shared with me that was really critical to kind of springboarding you to essentially being at this point, to have the choice that you were being full-time caretaker, and also the choice in buying a car, even if it was 30 plus banks that you had to go to get the loan on it.
Yeah, sometimes there's a moment that we have in our lives where you can definitely point at that and say, that's the moment things changed for me. And for me, it was my lieutenant, one of my lieutenants, who saw me in the police lobby after I got my first paycheck. My salary of $18,000 a year in 1995, and I'm staring at my first big boy adult paycheck and a job with benefits, and I've never seen that much money before in a paycheck in my life. She saw the look on my face, and she yelled out my name, and I kind of gave a start and looked, and she said, "In my office now." I thought I didn't know what I'd done, but obviously I'd done something wrong. I didn't know what I was in for. She sat me down in her office. She shut the door. She said, "Let me guess. I saw the look on your face looking at that check. You're going to take that money. You're going to go out. You're going to blow it on compact discs, stuff for your car, and clothes." And I said, yeah, that's what I was thinking about doing." And she said, "No, you're not going to do that." She said, "Look, I'm not allowed to tell you to do this, but I'm going to tell you to do it anyway. You're going to go next door. You're going to go to human resources. You're going to open what's called a 457 or a 403B. I don't care which one it is, but you're going to open one of them. And starting next check, you're going to start contributing to it. I don't care how much, but you're going to contribute something. And over time, Jim, what you're going to find is the money that you contribute to those funds or that fund, whichever one you choose, when you get a raise, when you get a COLA increase, contribute more to it. If you work out your finances that right now you can contribute more than what you initially contribute more. And over those years, over those decades, when you get to be my age, do you know what you'll have at the end of all that? And like a smart young man with a smart mouth, I said, bunch of money. And she looked at me like she was going to kill me. And I said, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." She said, and this is what stuck with me. She said, "Jim, it gives you choices. I don't expect you to understand what that means at 24 years old. But when you get to my age, you'll know what that means." And 23 years later, when my dad's health started to go downhill, and I met with the retirement folks with the state of Nevada and asked them how much it would be for me to buy 5 years and get out early, so that after the next 2 years, I could retire and then help him full time. They told me $87,000. $87,000 to buy 5 years of service. And that's when my mind raced back 23 years to when Roe told me that. And I understood what she meant. I understood what the word choices meant. It meant I now had the money. 87,000, that's all? Well, it was that's all because the money that I had built up until then was so much that 87,000, I could I could transfer that no problem. It was a no-brainer. And I have Rochelle to thank for that, because she forced me, even though it was tough love, but it was the right decision. And if she hadn't done that, if she hadn't seen me in the lobby that day, maybe I would have gotten to the same place, but I wouldn't have gotten to it in anywhere near the time that I did. I wouldn't have invested that early. And that was the key. If you don't have the money to invest a whole bunch of money, but you have the time can more than make up for the money that you think you need to invest if you're going to do it this way, if you're going to be in for the long term with these types of retirement plans.
Wow, what a remarkable story. Thanks for sharing that. Pretty cool. Kudos to her and you for making that moment happen, and look where we are today. Look where you are today. Let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive pair of pants that you purchased?
Oh.
Or shoes.
Okay. So the shoes, all right. Pants would have been $30. Shoes, can't recommend this enough. SAS shoes, $200 a pair, and they're expensive. That's back when I was working. And the reason they're great is those shoes last for years. So even though they're really expensive for someone and my salary, they were worth it because they would last forever. Now that I'm retired, I enjoy Nikes. So I love spending like $300 or something on a pair of Nikes with my favorite football team on them or something like that.
Nice. What's the craziest thing that you ever done to earn money?
The occupation is not that crazy, but the stories that I have, because I worked here in Las Vegas, is I was an animal caretaker for an animal hospital. That was my very first part-time job, and the boss, the head vet who owned the company, owned the hospital, was the personal veterinarian to Siegfried and Roy. So it wasn't unusual for me to come in on the weekends to take care of the animals long before the place opened. I would open the cat room door and I had 2 flamingos staring me at the face. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with flamingos. And I'd shut the door and call the doc at home. And he said, oh yeah, that's Siegfried and Roy's flamingos. Just leave them be. They'll be okay. or one of their tigers would show up in the hospital. That was pretty wild to try to help treat a tiger. When I started working for the police department, the special events that we would have, because we had the 2 largest venues in the state of Nevada for many years, I had an opportunity to meet Kenny Loggins backstage and have about a 5-minute conversation with him about music and life, and that was really neat. So wild things to do money, occupation not so much, but the experiences, because of where I am and who I was working for, that was pretty outrageous.
On the profession, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you love your profession and career?
Probably about 6.5.
Okay.
Nice. It was what I could do that I knew I was good at to earn money to get to the next place. It wasn't something that defined who I was, but I needed to give it 100% in order to get where I am financially.
Yeah, for sure. What's the most fun that you've ever had with money?
Buying that 392.
Okay. How much was that, by the way?
After taxes and options, $102,000.
Dang, that's a nice toy.
The final editions were just announced the other day by Stellantis, and they're going to be at least $6,000 above MSRP. So
wow,
that vehicle is only going to be in production for a total of 4 years, and it's going to be really hard to find.
Wow. What's a bucket list experience that you're still looking forward to?
I'm part of a Star Trek group called the Delta Flyers. They're a wonderful group of people who created by one of the Star Trek actors from the show Voyager, Garrett Wang. and his co-star Robert Duncan McNeil, and they are in the process right now of getting people together to go on the annual Star Trek cruise, and that is something that I really, really want to participate in. But my dad, he's not really thrilled with Star Trek. It would not be a happy experience for him, and I can't imagine being away from him for 7 to 9 days. So that's something that's in the offing. Eventually I'll get there.
Yep.
But something to look forward to.
Okay, cool. What's the dumbest thing you've ever wasted money on?
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's a new one on me. Dumbest thing I ever wasted money on. There are some clothing choices in the 90s that I would like to have back. Shirts, pants that on second thought were not very good fashion choices. So
Okay. What's something you spent way too much money on but you don't regret it?
the 392.
Okay, man, I love it. You liking that car, or the SUV rather. What was your first job?
First job was that animal caretaker job for the animal hospital. I did it for 2 years, and I left it to go work for the police department at the university because I had graduated high school. I'd started at the university and realized that even though it was paying a little bit less money, I would save money in gas and time instead of going back and forth from Henderson to Las Vegas for both college and then work. In the long run, it was a better investment of my time and a more efficient use of my time. So, yeah, that's how I transitioned from one part-time job to the other.
Gotcha. What was a key lesson you learned from childhood?
From my mom, I learned the importance of hard work. And from my dad, I learned the importance of honesty. I got where I am today through a ton of hard work. With that side hustle I created with the intake technician position, I upped my annual income by about 25%. But that meant that I had to put in a lot more work with overtime. So there was a cost. So I had to work really, really hard. But the first 5 years I spent with the department, when everybody saw, even though I was a kid, a college kid working part-time, they saw how honest I was. They saw my character. So when it came time for possibility of a full-time job, it was a no-brainer to them because they knew who I was. They knew I wasn't a risk. And most importantly, I think, and a lesson to be learned today is they knew that I was smart enough to not try something if I didn't know how to do it. And if I didn't know how to do it, I would ask someone how to do it before I tried it. And you can imagine all the different bureaucratic possibilities with the law enforcement and how you prosecute someone, how you put a case together. It's really important to know when you need to ask questions instead of just doing something that you think is the way to do it. You can't make mistakes.
Any last words of advice for somebody who's just starting out on their journey?
I work with a lot of 20-somethings, and I trying to give them advice. And what I hear consistently is, the economy is a lot worse now than it was when you were in your 20s. The opportunities aren't there today like they were back when you were 24. It's a lot tougher for young people nowadays than it was for you back in 1995. And, that all may be true, but that only means when you sit down and think about it, it only means that you're going to have to work harder. And where in 1995, it was rare for someone 24 years old to start investing then. Now, today, it's got to become the standard because the most powerful asset you have is time. And for you young folks out there, you need to use that to your advantage as soon as possible. Start investing immediately. as soon as you can. I started when I was in high school. I kicked in big time when I got a full-time job. But you have to start early in today's world. That's the key.
Awesome, James. Net worth of $2.8 million with his pension. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, pal.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.